In this video, we're going to be reviewing and demonstrating the installation of the Old Weathered Barn, a built and ready landmark structure from Woodland Scenics. And we're starting right now. Hi, I'm Owen. In this video, I'm reviewing a new accessory that I just received. I bought this from Charles Rowe, one of the largest dealers in model railroading equipment in the country. And what I bought was the Old Weathered Barn. We're going to take a close look at that old weathered barn, and I'm going to demonstrate how it looks on my layout. Now, I haven't got it finally attached to the layout. I've got to prepare the site first, but we're going to get a good walk around it, see it lit up, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. The Old Weathered Barn is going to be positioned in the area where Skeeter's Bait Shop is right now. I've started demolition by removing the guardrails from around the gravel parking lot. My next step will be to remove the gravel and remove Skeeter's Bait Shop. Now, Skeeter's Bait Shop is actually an HO scale structure, and I put it here simply because at the time it was far away from everything else on the layout, and it didn't look that unusual or didn't look that far out of kilter. But it's not really satisfactory, and so now I'm going to be replacing it with an O-scale accessory, the Old Weathered Barn. So the bait shop's going to go, the gravel's going to go, and then I'm going to need to level that area by adding additional plaster to the side closest to the railroad track in order to get it even with the side closest to the roadway. And once I have that completed, it'll be time to go ahead and put the Old Weathered Barn in position. So I'm moving on with that, and then we'll come back when we're ready for the next step. I've put the Old Weathered Barn in place temporarily just to get a look at how it fits with the layout and also to see what it looks like lit up. I've connected the lights, and you can see the wires running over tops of the trolley tracks because I'm not really ready to drill the holes and put them underneath yet. But it does give you a good sense of what it looks like. Now, I added a couple things to the Old Weathered Barn. In the front, above the door there, you'll see that gooseneck light. I added that on. That was something that I just thought should be there in an old weathered barn, so I put one on both ends of the barn, and we'll go around and look at the one on the other end in a moment. You can see the windows illuminated there, but they'll look a lot more realistic when I turn the lights down and you see them in semi-darkness. The hayloft doors at the top are also pretty realistic looking. Now, this is something that may not be familiar with a lot of people, but there's a rope hanging down there that is simulating how loose hay would have been brought up and put in the loft, in the hayloft, years ago. Really, before hay balers became popular, back in the days when hay was put up loose, back in the days when farms ran on horsepower, the horsepower of real horses, not tractors. That's pretty realistic. I'll get into more of that in a moment. But let's walk around and take a look at the barn, first by turning down the lights here and making it into a semi-dark state, and then going and looking at it from the sides and see how it looks in those perspectives. With the lights turned down, you can see the barn lit up much better. Now, there's some light leaks underneath where the two windows are on the left side. That'll be fixed when I have it permanently attached. I'll use a Woodland Scenics product that it blacks out that, covers that up, and hides that light leak so it won't be showing through. But I need to do a lot of work on the site where the barn is sitting first in order to get it leveled. Now, let's move around and see what it looks like from the side. Here's a quick look at the rear of the barn. You can see the light that I put over the door, the gooseneck light, but you can also see that there's a window lit and there's a door a little bit cracked open, so light's coming out from the inside of the barn there as well. Now let's move around to the side. This side of the barn is the one with most of the windows lit up. This would be similar to what would have been the case in a dairy barn years ago, where The cows would have been coming in on one side of the barn where the stanchions and the stalls were, and those would have been lit up. That part of the barn would have been lit up because work was going on there. The cows were being milked, and cows were being cared for, and the light was necessary, so that would have been lit up. Again, there's a little light leaking under the bottom of the barn, but that'll be taken care of when we actually affix it permanently to its location. A barn such as this in days gone by was not just a building on a farm, it was the economic hub of the farm. This is where the money was made. This is where the food for the animals was stored. This is where the animals were cared for, and it was designed very deliberately to be the economic center of that farm. The silo that you see on the side here, that tall gray looking structure, that's typical of silos that would have been built 100 years ago, maybe even further back than that. The silo was a place to store fodder. Basically, there was two kinds of silage: corn that was chopped and pumped into the silo, blown up through the top into an entrance into the silo where it settled down and actually fermented, or haylage, hay that was chopped up and put into the silo as well. So there was basically, that's what the silo was for. It provided fodder for the cows, a very highly nutritious and highly storable source of food for the cows for the winter season when the crops were not in the field, pasture was not available. The hayloft, which I mentioned before, those large doors at the top near the peak, provided access to the hayloft. Now, those ropes are hanging down from pulleys on a steel rail. That's a pretty heavy steel rail, and it was attached to the underside of a very heavy beam that was very well supported. Those doors opened up, and a fork mechanism comes out from the inside of the barn. Now, realistically, in an actual barn situation, those doors would extend all the way to the top. They would extend all the way to the eaves under the roof. And that door would probably fall open, drop open, and lay flat against the barn, hanging down. Inside on that rail is a fork. That fork is a complex mechanism that can be dropped down into a hay wagon that would be parked in front of the barn. And once the fork was dropped down into the hay, this is loose hay on a hay wagon, then the fork would be opened so that the tines would spread out and grab that hay. Then that hay fork would be pulled back up. Horses pulling on a rope that extended out from the front of the barn through pulley system would pull that fork, loaded now with a great big mass of loose hay, back up. Once that hay reached the top, it would lock into the pulley mechanism that was hanging on that rail. Once that locked into place, then instead of the vertical motion, there'd be a horizontal motion, and as the horses advanced, they would pull that forward, and that hay fork would go back along that rail into the loft until it reached a point where the farmer wanted to store that hay. Then the rope would be pulled, the tines would open up, drop that hay into the hay loft, the fork would be pulled back out to the front again, drop back into the hay wagon again, and that process would be completed till the hay wagon was completely unloaded. That was a very complex mechanical device, highly inventive on the part of whoever developed that system, and that was a labor-saving device that allowed them to put loose hay into that hayloft and to spread it from end to end, piling it evenly throughout the hayloft. So again, that's a complex mechanism. That's part of a complex building that is designed to do a lot of things in order to be able to support the farm. My take on this is that Woodland Scenics has done a really good job. The lights that I added, the gooseneck lights, I think those are just more realistic and would be kind of what you'd see. On this side of the barn, you see a small machinery shed. Tractors, other equipment before tractors would be kept in that shed. Wagons, other things that you didn't want out in the weather would be kept in that area, that bay that opens next to the silo. The front corner, that might have been a tack room back in the old days when the barn was functioning as a horse operated farm. So probably that would have been a tack room back then where all the harnesses and horse collars and so forth is kept. But the barn overall is pretty realistic, complete with a weather vane on a cupola. That cupola was a functional part of the barn that allowed ventilation so that air could move up through the top and escape through that top and keep the hayloft temperature a little bit more manageable. If you look at the front of the barn, you see some boards sticking out, things like that. That's also very realistic of an old weathered barn. You'd see that. And the fieldstone foundation around the barn is also very realistic. I grew up on a farm that had a fieldstone foundation that went up all the way to the second level. So the whole first floor was fieldstone, and then above that the barn was built, and the entire framing for the barn was all mortise and tenon. There was no nails used in the framing. It was all pegs and joints that were held together that way. But this is pretty realistic. From the silo and the weathered roof and the weathered front of the barn, the fieldstone foundation, the coloring, it's just very realistic. Woodland Scenics, in my opinion, did a real nice job with this, so I'm quite happy to see this and quite happy to add it to my layout. I need to do some site preparation before I finally put it down, make sure everything is level there. Well, that'll do it for today's video, folks. I hope you enjoyed this review and demonstration of the old weathered barn from Woodland Scenics. I did. I'm going to enjoy having it on my layout as soon as I can get the site prepared so I can firmly attach it and get the wiring hidden underneath the table. Please consider subscribing, click the thumbs up, like the video, share it on social media or with anyone else that you know that's into model railroading. And as always, thanks for watching.